For critical information ignored by the mainstream media, log on to davidicke.com/headlines now.
Broadcasting live from the great city of Manchester, England. This is the Richie Allen Show on davidicke.com.
Good morning. It's the 1st of May 2016. How are you? Sunday morning. This is Sunday View in association with davidicke.com/headlines. And as the sting, or the jingle said, it is live from the great city of Manchester. Sunday View has been live now for a few weeks and it's all good. It's good to be live. It really is. It's been a pretty busy old morning. Tell you more about that in a minute. Want to first of all mention and welcome those listening to us on Fab Radio 2 at Fab Radio in Manchester. Of course, we're broadcasting live on davidicke.com, on the TuneIn app and on my own website, redistribution.co.uk. Stay with davidicke.com/headlines. That's where you'll get terrific analysis of all the big stories today and every day. And I'm going to mention again, David is about to embark on the Worldwide Wake Up Tour, which begins in London. Well, it begins on the Isle of Wight a week or so before that with a warm-up event. But it begins proper in London on June 18th, but not at Shepherd's Bush. It has been moved to the O2 Brixton Academy because of work going on at Shepherd's Bush. That means there are more tickets available for the David Icke Worldwide Wake Up Tour in London on June 18th. It's now at O2 Academy Brixton. There are tickets. Go to davidicke.com. Special good morning to Mark Pajerski, and I can't say enough about Mark and all the great support and help and encouragement he has given the Richie Allen Show. He auctioned a beautiful piece of jewellery, wonderful healing crystal yesterday. I didn't know anything about it till this morning, to be honest, and raised €100 for the programme. He's always doing stuff like that. Great guy. Thanks to him. And to Patricia Braunschweiler, great supporter of the independent media as well, friend of mine and a friend of Maria Heller's and others. Thanks for all your support. I can't find any more words to say that. I just mean it. Thank you very much. And I want to say good morning to Sean Hinchcliffe. Sean, good morning. It's a tired Sean Hinchcliffe who's listening to Sunday View. It is today because his granddaughter Lily Rose was born at 2:30 a.m. this morning. What a wonderful thing. And he shared a picture of young Lily Rose. When I say young, she's not even a day old yet. Not even 12 hours old. And she is beautiful. I just retweeted that there. I hope everybody's doing well, Sean. Mum must be tired, must be exhausted as well. Happy, happy, happy times. The 1st of May, you'll never forget that now. So good luck to everybody associated with young Lily Rose, and may she have a wonderful life. Right, so there's lots to get into. At this point, I'm going to have a quick look through the Sunday papers. I must mention that, and I have mentioned on social media, Gilad Atzmon joins me on the programme today. Now, when I say joins me, I pre-recorded an interview with Gilad about an hour ago. He's currently on tour. Gilad had been in touch with me. He's a regular guest on the programme, as you know. Gilad is a wonderful jazz saxophonist, brilliant musician, activist, human rights activist, writer, author, terrific man. Born in Israel, doesn't consider himself to be Jewish, has been very critical of the state of Israel and of Zionism for such a long time. Gilad was in touch with Richie, I've got to come back on. I said, well, we have a bank holiday tomorrow. We got good old Jordan Maxwell coming on Tuesday. I said, we better get you on today then. And to his absolute credit, he got out of bed after apparently a brilliant gig last night with the Blockheads and spoke to me very candidly about how he sees this whole anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism story, which is blown up over the last few days. I'll bring you that interview with Gilad a bit later on in the broadcast. Don't miss it. He's got some very interesting things to say. So unfortunately, or fortunately, because of the seriousness of this, much of Sunday View today is going to be focusing on, obviously, the big news story, anti-Semitism and all of that. But before we get into it, I am just going to run through briefly the other headlines, just one or two other stories making the news today. I'm doing this on the fly, by the way, as well, because I was watching the Sunday morning political programmes and listening to them as well, trying to grab bits and pieces in time for our scheduled 11 a.m. start. I didn't do too bad, but it's been a hectic old morning, it must be said. The Labour candidate for the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, says that his chances of being elected have been harmed by anti-Semitism. Don't think of yourself, Sadiq, whatever you do. Wow. BBC are covering, a lot of people are covering today, the fact that the Duchess of Cambridge, the wife of the future King of England, Prince William, is the subject of a Vogue magazine cover. That's apparently important. I don't think so, but it's getting a lot of coverage today. Barack Obama spoke for the final time at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which is where, well, effectively the press get a chance to sit down and have dinner with the president while comedians and people stand up and poke fun at him, and then he pokes fun at other people. Do you want me to play you some of that? You don't really. I hear you crying and groaning. Have a listen.
Here we are. My 8th and final appearance at this unique event. And I am excited. If this material works well, I'm going to use it at Goldman Sachs next year.
Yeah, you really don't want to hear any more of that. He's got all the charisma of a wet sponge, Obama. Yes, Democrats and Republicans were the subject of jokes by the jovial, the wonderful, good old boy, Barack Obama, at the last White House Correspondents' Dinner. For him, at least. I'm not going to subject you to any more of that. Just a quick look through the papers at 6 minutes past the hour. The Telegraph runs with BBC faces checks into quality of its shows. The government plans, or has plans, for the BBC's next royal charter. The Telegraph says the BBC will face unprecedented new checks with a mid-term review of its programming being held every 5 years. The Sunday Telegraph also suggests that there will be a crackdown even on competitive scheduling. What that means is the BBC running its dancing reality nonsense programme on Saturdays against whatever nonsense ITV reality programme that's going on at the same time. There might be something in that for us next week. I'll have a look at it. The Sunday Mail going with the same thing. BBC faces charter ban on Saturday strictly. The Sunday Times, Israel, Labour in denial over anti-Semitism. Mark Regev, who is the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom, has written an article in the Sunday Times today, owned by Rupert Murdoch and News Corp. Won't tell you much about it because you're going to be hearing from Regev shortly. He appeared on Sunday. I always say this, it's the Andrew Marr Show. It's the BBC Sunday morning flagship programme. Tell you more about that in a few minutes. The Observer goes with Sadiq Khan, the Labour mayoral candidate. He's a bit cheesed off at this and reckons it's going to sink his campaign. Sunday Express goes with the story Fresh Agony for the McCanns. They claim, does the Sunday Express, they're obsessed with the McCanns and that particular story. Not saying that's a bad thing, I'm just saying they are. That the Portuguese detective who led the failed investigation into the disappearance of Madeleine McCann has written a second book on the case, a move that will cause fresh anguish for her parents. He won, he had a libel verdict, a judgment that went against him, overturned, didn't he, against the McCanns. He always said that he didn't believe their account of it. That's what he always maintained. I have no opinion on it. But I do have an opinion on this, and then we're going to move on to the big story of the weekend. The Sunday Mirror has on its front page the former snooker player Willie Thorne. Now, I've met Willie Thorne 2 or 3 times over the years at various snooker events. Caroline and myself met him a few years ago in Manchester at the Premier League snooker. Lovely man. I've always liked him. I'm a big snooker fan, and I think he's a terrific commentator. They have a picture of him on their front page at what would appear to be a betting machine of some type. Willie Thorne, sad new low, gambling addict snooker star hunches over betting machine. That is the story. Anybody who follows snooker or sport will know is that Willie Thorne has had difficulties over the years with a gambling problem. He's been very candid about that when he's spoken on British television in the last couple of years. But that's gutter journalism, in my opinion. To be sneaking around after people, taking photographs of him when he's obviously had a very low ebb. You know, a gambling addict is using a gambling machine for the press to be photographing him, putting it on the front page when all that is going on in the world. It's pathetic gutter journalism from the Sunday Mirror. No thought given to the family and friends of Willie Thorne, his wife who stands by him. Willie Thorne is a nice man. He's a gambling addict. He's got a problem that he needs help with. Is it the right thing to do to blast him across the front page of the Sunday Mirror? No, it isn't. It's what the tabloids do. It's disgusting. It really is disgusting, you know. I wonder, was there anybody at the Sunday Mirror who said, listen, this guy's really going through a bad time. He might harm himself. He might be pushed over the edge to see himself splashed across the Sunday papers using a gambling machine. Let's consider how it might how it might impact Willie Thorne. No, not at all. Not at all. That's what the tabloids do. Right, I'm going to shut up ranting and I'm going to crack on with the programme. You probably have forgotten by now what exactly Ken Livingstone, the former Mayor of London, said to Vanessa Feltz on BBC Radio London that has sparked this furore, this witch hunt that we have seen led by the British media in the last few days. What did Ken Livingstone say? Well, he was talking about Naz Shah, former Bradford, current Bradford, she hasn't been thrown out of that job yet, Labour MP who had been retweeting things that were tweeted and were shared before she became the MP in Bradford. Things like, you know, we should relocate Israel to America and all this sort of stuff. So since Ken Livingstone got involved and weighed in, it's become nothing. We've gotten nothing else from the 24-hour news cycle but anti-Semitism. So you might want to remember exactly what Ken said. This is what Ken said.
She talked about relocating Israel to America. She talked about what Hitler did being legal. And she talked about the Jews rallying. And she used the word Jews, not Israelis or Israel. You didn't find that to be anti-Semitic?
No, it's completely over the top. It's not anti-Semitic. I mean, let's remember when Hitler won his election in 1932, his policy then was that Jews should be moved to Israel. He was supporting Zionism. His boy went mad and ended up killing 6 million Jews. But the simple fact in all of this is that Naz made these comments at a time when there's another brutal Israeli attack on the Palestinians. And there's one stark fact that virtually no one in the British media ever reports. In almost all these conflicts, the death toll is usually between 60 and 100 Palestinians killed for every Israeli. Now, any other country doing that would be accused of war crimes, but it's like we have a double standard about the policies of the Israeli government.
The media were very interested in picking out Ken's comments about Hitler's policies in 1933. They weren't too keen to pick up on Ken's assertion that between 60 and 100 Palestinians have died historically for every one Israeli. He still maintains, does Ken Livingstone, up until, at least until I went on air anyway, he's been saying that he was speaking the truth and there was nothing offensive in his comments whatsoever. Now, yesterday, the Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, and for our overseas listeners, each government secretary or minister has an opposite number in the main opposition party. Okay, so the transport secretary, the culture secretary, the home secretary, they have an opposite number in the main opposition party. They're called the shadow minister, the shadow secretary. So John McDonnell is basically George Osborne's opposite number, as Osborne is the current Chancellor of the Exchequer. McDonnell wants Ken to apologise. This is him yesterday.
Is to completely restore the reputation of the Labour Party with regard to us as a force that's tackling anti-racism and anti-Semitism in particular. And the inquiry itself will enable us to have a thorough inquiry, bring out guidance for all our party members and our candidates, training as well. But in addition to that, it will introduce a procedure where we root out any forms of anti-Semitism or any forms of racism.
Ken Livingstone has stood by his comments today. Does he have a future in the Labour Party, do you think?
Ken's position will be dealt with formally by the process that's been established, and I can't prejudge that now. I just wish Ken would have apologised today for some of the offence that he's caused. I know he said he regrets what he said, but I think he should now apologise.
McDonnell thinks he should apologise and that there should be training given to Labour Party members, and particularly parliamentary Labour Party members or politicians or MPs or aides, maybe, secretaries. Training for what, John? Training not to criticise Israel? Is that what it's all about? Training not to tell the truth? Because everything Ken Livingstone said was the truth, and we are going to come to that in a minute with this guy Negev, Mark Regev, the Israeli ambassador to Britain, and we're going to hear from Gilad Atzmon as well shortly. Everything he said was right. Everybody, it seems, wants Ken Livingstone to apologise. The vitriolic and the over-the-top haranguing and harassing by anybody or to anybody or against anybody who would defend Ken Livingstone is absolutely shocking. I've never seen anything like it in my time as a broadcaster. What I'm going to play you now is Ken Livingstone on LBC Radio with David Mellor on Friday morning last. And I'm not prone to over-exaggeration. I haven't been, and I'm not, and I never will be. But I can safely say that in my career, I haven't heard or witnessed the sort of conduct you are about to hear now. And by conduct, I mean the conduct of a presenter of a national radio programme. Somebody sworn to be. When I say sworn to be, they don't sign contracts, they don't swear on the Bible. But they have an unwritten contract with the public who is listening to be objective and to search for the truth. Listen to David Mellor, former Tory MP, by the way. And LBC Radio is full of them, either former Tory MPs or former Tory wannabes, like Ian Dale, the disgusting, despicable Ian Dale, who failed several times in campaigns to run for the Conservative Party. Listen to David Mellor harangue Ken Livingstone and tell me, regardless of what your opinion is on this, tell me this is acceptable in an open and a fair and a free society.
Hitler is such a toxic person, it's impossible to have any kind of rational discussion with Hitler's name bandied around, particularly if one is saying, Hitler did something that some people might approve of, because you can't talk about Hitler doing anything good, because Hitler, as you said, went mad and killed 6 million people. Can you climb off it, Ken? Climb off it.
If I'd known what this eruption, all this waste of time was going to be, I wouldn't have mentioned Hitler. But I've been.
So are you sorry for mentioning Hitler?
I wish I
just
hadn't.
Say
because it's,
you wish you hadn't. And are you sorry for it?
I apologise for telling the truth.
But are you sorry that you mentioned Hitler? Are you sorry you mentioned Hitler?
I regret doing that.
Are you sorry you mentioned Hitler?
Because sorry sounds like I'm apologising for what I said.
No, you're not, Ken.
And what
you're
I said
just
is
allowing yourself to get back into it, and all these people that dislike you and just want to have a go at you. You're taking, you're shooting their fox. I'm sorry for mentioning Hitler.
Why, I am, because it's caused all this nonsense.
Well, say it then. I am sorry for mentioning Hitler.
Well, I mean, I'm not getting into some sort of apology industry here.
I'm sorry for mentioning Hitler. It's so easy.
If I could go back,
You're not a Hitler man. But I'm sorry for mentioning Hitler.
I am never not going to say what I believe to be true. And as I say, if the Prime Minister of Israel says exactly the same thing 2 days before, how can anyone accuse
Haven't you done appalling damage to your party, the Labour Party? In 5 days we are now before a mayoral election in London, elections all over the country. The Jewish vote in London is going to be much depleted because of this.
Because of this, you've cost the Labour local election campaign, you've damaged it irreparably. That scene was played out across national media in England with different presenters and commentators. You can't mention Hitler. You cannot talk about him. Don't mention him. Did you hear Mellor? Let me play that again because this is very serious. Mellor suggests that Hitler is so toxic you can't have any rational discussion of him.
Hitler is such a toxic person, it's impossible to have any kind of rational discussion with Hitler's name bandied around, particularly if one is saying, Hitler did something that some people might approve of.
That's incredible, isn't it? That might be true if you were Jewish, Maybe Jewish folks can't talk rationally about Hitler because of what Hitler did and what he means to Jewish people. But the rest of us are surely entitled to talk about Hitler, who he was, what he did, why he did it, what we were told, what we weren't told, who supported him, who funded him, who were his backers. Why is there such fear about talking about Hitler? I think we know the answer to that, and we're certainly going to come back to it shortly. Mark Regev is the Israeli ambassador to Britain. He was on the Andrew Marr show about an hour and a half ago this morning. As I said, it's a flagship BBC Sunday morning political debate programme, interview programme. I thought you might want to know what Mark Regev said, the Israeli ambassador to Britain, so I recorded it. First of all, they get into the Hitler question, the question of what Livingstone said about Hitler. Have a listen.
OK, let's go back, if we can, to the controversy which kicked off this last piece of the row, which was Ken Livingstone's comments, where he said that the Jewish Zionists in Germany had been talking to Hitler, and that, I mean, he applied some kind of weird kind of comparison, which I don't think anybody follows him down. Nonetheless, it is true that there were conversations, weren't there? Because your own Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu, has cited the Hitler talking to the Grand Mufti and wanting to move Jews out of Germany into the Middle East at that point.
Actually, it was the Grand Mufti who refused to allow Jews to move out and preferred them to be killed. But that's a separate story. Look, in the first years of the Third Reich, when Hitler was consolidating his power, so his policy was to ethnically cleanse Germany of all its Jewish population.
He wanted the Jews out, and he didn't much mind where. Madagascar was talked about.
Correct, 100% correct. And the Jewish Agency was out there energetically trying to save Jews, getting them out. And, of course, they were saving lives because people who stayed behind, most of them were murdered. There were people in this country, great British people, who were organising the Kindertransport. Many hundreds of Jewish children, lives were saved by those very good British people. Now, are we collaborating with the Germans by trying to get our people out to save their lives? Of course not. It is a horrendous and perversion of history.
Mark Regev, the Israeli ambassador to Britain, is a pervert. And I don't mean a sexual pervert. He perverts the truth, and he is a perversion of humanity. He is a world-class Zionist. He is a mass murderer. He participates and stands over, seeks to justify the brutal genocide of the Palestinian people. So the German Zionists were signing deals with Hitler, financial deals involving a bank in Palestine, but they weren't collaborating. Interesting that. Before we hear more from Regev, I want you to listen to the question posed to Regev by Mar again. Listen to the way Mar categorises what Ken Livingstone actually said.
OK, let's go back, if we can, to the controversy which kicked off this last piece of the row, which was Ken Livingstone's comments, where he said that the Jewish Zionists in Germany had been talking to Hitler, and that, I mean, he applied some kind of weird kind of comparison, which I don't think anybody follows him down.
He applied some sort of weird comparison, which I don't think anybody really follows him down. Why do you pay your BBC licence fee? Isn't that justification enough on its own to tear up the contract that you entered into when you first began paying your television licence in this country? Is that not justification? That is what is known as a lie. It's a lie of massive, massive proportions. It is a huge lie, what Andrew Marr said there. Am I exaggerating? I want you to hear it again. Listen to this again.
OK, let's go back, if we can, to the controversy which kicked off this last piece of the row, which was Ken Livingstone's comments, where he said that the Jewish Zionists in Germany had been talking to Hitler, and that, I mean, he applied some kind of weird kind of comparison, which I don't think anybody follows him down. Nonetheless, it is true that there were conversations, weren't there? Because your own Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu, has cited the
weird comparison, which nobody follows him down, said the disgraceful excuse for a presenter or a journalist, Andrew Marr. That's what he said. What Ken Livingstone said was absolutely true. We'll return to it in a minute. So no answer then. Really. So then they get into anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Mar asks Regev if there is a difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism.
I guess the essence of the problem here is that there are a lot of very, very principled people who are very, very angry about the actions of the Israeli government. You may disagree with them, but they are legitimately very, very angry about what's happened to the Palestinian people. And when they say they are anti-Zionists, then the accusation comes back they are anti-Semites. Is there a distinction between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism?
If you're out there, with different flags, and you're saying this group of people has a right to national self-determination, and that group of people has a right to national self-determination, but you say, but the Jewish people, they don't have that right. That the idea that the Jewish people would want sovereignty and independence, that is somehow perverse, that is evil. You have to ask, why are you holding Jews to a different standard? And there's a word for that.
There's a word for that, he says. Another non-answer there. So Maher appears at this stage to press him about the right to criticise Israel. He wouldn't answer him about the difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. He mumbled a lot of nonsense about the Jewish right to a homeland, which again, I've spoken so much about that in recent weeks and months I'm not going to get into. Maher tries to press him about the right to criticise Israel.
There are people who say, as Seamus Milne, Jeremy Corbyn's spokesman said recently, that it was a crime for the State of Israel to exist, who don't believe the State of Israel should exist. That's, in a sense, the people you're talking about. There's many, many more people who say the way the government of Israel has behaved over the last 20 years offends us and appalls us, and we are angry about it. Do you accept those people have the right to criticise your government in vociferous terms without being accused of anti-Semitism?
Of course people have the right to criticise the government of Israel. Israeli citizens do it every day. I mean, if you follow the very vigorous public debates we have in my country, you'll know that every government position is open to debate in the parliament, in the press, in a very, very robust civil society. It's not about criticising Israel. It's about demonising the Jewish state. I mean, the comments we've heard over the last 2-3 weeks that were made public, it's got nothing to do with criticising this or that particular Israeli policy. It's demonising and a vilification of my country and its very right to exist.
And its very right to exist. So again, Regev says, and Maher doesn't go on to challenge him, by the way, I'm not editing this selectively. You can find the interview on the BBC iPlayer. Maher doesn't go on to challenge him. Regev says again that basically the criticism always ends up being fundamentally a cover, which is challenging Israel's right to exist. If Maher was any good, of course, he isn't. He's a useless BBC cardboard cutout. If he was a presenter of any note. And again, he isn't. This isn't childishness. This isn't, this isn't David and Goliath. You're getting a small-time presenter having a go at a BBC presenter. No, it isn't. Maher is dreadful. He is dreadful. If he was any good, he would say, OK then, Mr. Regev, when you engage in an aerial bombing campaign on Gaza that kills thousands of people, children, when you detain children, when you murder people on the streets, how is that equated with people hating you and your right to exist? But Maher doesn't, because there's a great old farmer saying in County Waterford, farmers would always say if they thought you weren't up to much, they would say you're about as useful as tits on a bull. Maher is useless. Is he useless or is he playing the game, Maher? I would say a bit of both. He does go on to ask him about the boycott, divestment, sanction movement, though. You want to have a listen to that? Here it is.
Would you regard the various campaigns to boycott Israeli goods or not to turn up to seminars, academic seminars in Israel and so forth, as anti-Semitic as well?
I would ask the following question. If you're sitting at some university campus here in the UK, right, and of all the troubles in the world and in the Middle East specifically, and the Middle East is going through a particularly turbulent period of violence and extremism and so forth, and you say, of all the countries on the planet, I choose to boycott Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, the only country with an independent trade union, the only country where governments are routinely changed through elections. I just raise a question, why are you picking on the Jews and the Jews alone?
And the answer will probably come back because of the behaviour of settlers in the occupied territories and because of the wall and because of some of the terrible things that have happened in the conflict between the Palestinian people and the Jewish people.
But let's be clear, you're saying if you choose to boycott Israel, you're saying it's all Israel's fault. It's all the fault of the Jewish state. You're saying all the blame in this 100-year conflict between Israelis and Arabs, it's all Israel's fault. That's such a one-sided view. It can't be justified by any objective criteria.
But it can by any objective criteria. The indigenous people of that land, of that part of the world, have been forced out of it by an occupying people that have no claim in law or in history to the land except for the preposterous and ludicrous biblical quote which Golden Meir alluded to several times and which most Israelis still do. Israel stands as a promise, the Holy Land, as a promise made by God to Abraham himself. It would be absurd to call its legitimacy into question. It's a terrorist state. It's an apartheid state. I say it every day on the programme. It commits heinous human rights abuses and acts of genocide on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. And as a wonderful man said on the Big Questions today with Nicky Campbell, which was airing just as I was finishing as I was coming to air, no state has a right to exist. State isn't a person. It isn't a living thing. It isn't organic. Israel certainly doesn't. I'm not going to repeat my opinion on it. A lot of you are bitching about this. I'm going to read a few tweets, then I'm going to take a break, then we're going to have Gilad Atzmon. So let me read a few tweets. Lisa Jane says, Mar show makes my blood boil. Not only is he pushing a falsity, but also priming viewers for our intake of refugee children, she says. Karen says, next they will be making anti-Zionism illegal. Scroll down because there's loads of these. Lynn says, Richie, they are bully boys and truth twisters. By that, she means the media. Sue was on to say, oh my God, if people can't see through this, you cannot say one word against Israel, she says. And the Holy Shroom on Twitter says, Richie, LBC and Mellor are doing their best to rid the country of free speech. Facts are facts and the truth will out. Well, David Mellor is not a broadcaster. Well, he is because that's what he does now, but he isn't a broadcaster. He's a Tory apologist. He's a former Conservative Party MP, you know. How can you credibly tell an audience of people, we are going to objectively disseminate the news for you and present it to you in a fair and balanced way when LBC is full of Tories from the top down? It's a joke. Ronan says, apologising for telling the truth. This means the elites can rewrite history in their favour and without question. Of course, that's what it's all about. Sean says, morning mate, no swearing, but WTF, anti-Semite. The Zio SS agenda 1934 to move Jews to Palestine. What's wrong with the truth, says Sean. Keep the tweets coming in. My email is down at the moment. I don't know why that is. If you are emailing me, I humbly apologise that I haven't been able to read your emails. I can't access it for some reason. I hope you hear this and you've not gone away in a huff thinking that I'm ignoring you. Gilad Atzmon is on this programme responding to this in a couple of minutes' time. You do not want to miss him.
Do you want to release the full potential of your soul consciousness and find out how to experience that power in all areas of your life now? Go to livingasyoursoul.com for free guidance with in-depth how-to articles, free healing meditations of creation recordings, free soul solutions, and much, much more. livingasyoursoul.com, making the profound practical.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Welcome back to the programme. Sunday View is live every Sunday now at 11 a.m. BST, brought to you in association with davidicke.com/headlines. Check out our broadcast partners, livingasyoursoul.com. And I want to pay a special mention to Chris Seeley at dataclinic.co.uk. It's a terrific company based in the northwest here, an ethical company, wonderful guys. If you've got a device that's got any problems at all with memory, you've lost data or storage, and it's an electronic device, give these guys a shout. They are brilliant and they are big supporters of the independent media. Thank you, Chris, and everybody associated with dataclinic.co.uk. It's 26 and a half minutes to the top of the hour. Well, Gilad Atzmon is a jazz saxophonist. He's an author. He is, you can find him at gilad.co.uk. That's his website, gilad.co.uk. He is, he's become, I suppose, as famous as Gilad is for his music, and he's hugely successful, and he is a brilliant musician. He's also become as famous globally for a number of TV appearances he gave to the BBC and other mainstream news organisations over the years, criticising the state of Israel. His views on anti-Semitism and racism have all, used to make him very popular with some of these organisations to bring him on, to have a go at him. He is very, very outspoken, spoken to many times over the years. I have a lot of time for him and his opinions. He was born in Tel Aviv to a secular family. He doesn't consider himself to be Jewish, though. And he got in touch with me overnight to say he was desperate to come back on the programme in light of what he was hearing on BBC, on ITV, on Channel 4, and the rest of it. And we're booked solid mostly for most of next week. So we said, why don't we get you on Sunday View? Not done that before with anybody. So we said, we'll bring him on. This is Gilad Atzmon. This was basically edited at the last second, but I think it's okay. In terms of, I think it's, from an audio perspective, I think it's okay. This is Gilad Atzmon with me a bit earlier.
Man, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm very happy that to be your first Sunday guest.
The first ever one, and if you weren't on the road, you'd have been on for the entire programme. Gilad, this is absolutely serious. Andrew Gilligan writing with Patrick Sawyer, Tim Ross and Robert Mendick in the Sunday Telegraph today has basically put forward what he describes as a dossier of events, of things that have happened in the recent past, which he says proves that anti-Semitism is endemic in the Labour Party. And just before you come in and I let you get on with it, he talks about council leaders sharing Facebook posts comparing Israel to ISIS. Jeremy Corbyn asking why an anti-Semitic mural in East London should be taken down. Jeremy Corbyn attended events in the past run by self-confessed Holocaust denier Paul Eisen long after his views had become clear. Now, George Galloway, the Mayor of London candidate, he seems to believe, Galloway, that this is all about Jeremy Corbyn and undermining him and the Labour Party. But I don't buy that for a minute. I believe it's more sinister. What are your thoughts, my friend?
No, to start with, there are, when you look, when you start to understand Jewish culture, you understand that within the context of Jewish culture, there is a very clear notion of Sabbath Goy. Sabbath Goy, originally from a Judaic perspective, is the person who is taking care on the Sabbath, on Saturday, when Jews, the holy day for the Jews, of all those things the Jews cannot do. It turns the light off, it turns the light on, it turns the oven on, and so on and so on. In modern politics, what the Sabbath Goy is the person, the Gentile, who is willing to take care of all the whims of or the political interests of the Jews. So Andrew Gilligan is definitely a classic case of a Sabbath Goy. A few days ago, we saw John Mann, a repulsive Sabbath Goy, who was misbehaving, shouting at Ken Livingstone, and actually these people are introducing a very dangerous type of politics and behavior to Western culture. And this is something that nobody really speaks about, and that is why it was very important for me to talk to you and to anyone else, actually. 3 days ago, we learned that Ken Livingstone was expelled or suspended, actually, right to say, suspended from the Labour Party for telling the absolute truth. Every person, both Zionist and anti-Zionist and academics, know that there was an extensive collaboration between the National Socialist, German National Socialist regime and the Zionist institutions as early as 1933, which is the transfer agreement. And by the way, it didn't end there. Even as late as 1944, we know about the Katzner affair, where Eichmann offered Rudolf Katzner, the Hungarian Zionist Jewish leader, to let 1 million Jews out of Hungary, and in return for 2,000 lorries. The German army was defeated at the time; they were withdrawing, and they needed some support. And it's a very interesting affair that led to an assassination in Israel. All those issues are well established. Now, what is very interesting...
Why are they so worried about it, Gilad? Why are the Israeli lobby in this country so worried about people finding out that there was collaboration to get... Because you could argue this. You could say, well, kudos to those Zionists in Germany who were still trying to get Jews out of Germany and into Palestine despite what Hitler was doing. Why are they so scared of this coming out?
To start with, this is a very interesting, and this is the next thing that we must talk about. Because for many years, the Jewish institutions worked very hard to conceal the Avara agreement, to conceal the Katzner affair, because these affairs are contradicting our Holocaust religion take on the Holocaust. So if we want to see Hitler as the number one evil man, and the Nazi regime is the ultimate form of racism, blah, 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 then it's quite hard to encompass the thought that the Zionist federations actually worked with Hitler. We have the German chief rabbi who actually wrote to Hitler. He was a Zionist. He said, we have a lot in common. You believe in race. We, the Jews, believe in race. You believe in nation. We believe in nation. We should collaborate rather than working against each other. Those issues do not fit with the Holocaust religion. Now, the difference...
No, they did. Now, listen, I'm not going to contradict you because you're right. But at the same time, the rabbi you mentioned might not have been aware, Gilad. I mean, these are different times. You and I can connect, electronically overnight and set up a conversation like this. But maybe these guys didn't realise that the Nazis were exterminating the sick, the disabled, people born with disabilities, anybody they didn't like. I mean, they might have said we have a lot in common, but ultimately, whoever funded Hitler, and we might come to that because a lot of these Zionists had they had their money invested in this man. He was a madman and he was hell-bent on killing people.
I don't want to turn it into a discussion about Hitler because...
No, neither do I, to be fair.
No, because we are in the current environment, we are not qualified, actually, to talk about Hitler or that regime in a frank manner, because there are too many things that we are not allowed to do. Now, why we are not allowed to do them? Because we are removed now from talking about truthfulness, about the truth, about historical facts. Why we are not allowed to talk about historical facts? Because these facts are apparently offensive to some Jews. Now, the issue here, the conclusion that one must draw here is that there is a clear discrepancy between the culture that is pushed by these Jewish oligarchs, whether it is Lord Levi or this our Donald Trump here, Mr. Sugar, Lord Sugar, or who is not in the Labour Party, or Michael Foster, who talk openly. We don't want anyone to say bad things about Israel or looking into our Holocaust or looking our history. This kind of politics contradicts completely the values of Western freedom. And what seems to me is that form of Jewish power. I wrote a book about Jewish power. A lot of people were upset with me. No one said that I said anything wrong.
No, but this is hilarious. I love this. You weren't criticised for the content. You were criticised for saying it.
For saying
That's right.
Now, if Jewish power was a vague concept, it is not vague anymore. When we see John Mann behave like a hooligan, in the BBC building.
Disgusting, wasn't it?
For the Jews, openly, the Jewish power is in front of our eyes.
Can I ask you a question on this?
Yeah.
You and I have spoken so many times before. I came across a book David wrote years ago called "And the Truth Shall Set You Free." And recently, a book called "The Nazi Roots of the Brussels European Union" has come out in the last few years. I was given a copy of it recently, and it corroborates much, if not all, of what David says in "And the Truth Shall Set You Free." I believe, Gilad, and I'm going to shut up, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I believe the real terror here for the Zionist agenda is that people understand that some of the people responsible for creating the State of Israel, those who saw 800,000 Palestinians, indigenous people, basically torn away from their land in the period 1947 to 1949, they are terrified that people find out that these people were responsible for funding, arming, and ultimately supporting the Nazi Party and Hitler because they wanted to control a post-Second World War with Hitler in charge. The same people. Now, this is historically true. I think that has a lot to do with it. They don't want people ever finding that out. I mean, Jewish people, can you imagine if you were a Jewish man or woman and your uncle or aunt or your mother was killed at Auschwitz or wherever, and you find out that some of the fathers of Zionism, of the Jewish project, had a hand in that? I believe that implicitly. What do you say to that?
I totally agree. And this is exactly why the Holocaust is handled as a religion rather than as an historic chapter. This is the issue. When it comes to religion, you then can put aside logic and rationality, and you have to accept some fundamentals. And this is exactly what the Jewish lobby is pushing. There is clear evidence of Ben-Gurion, who turned to be later the Prime Minister of Israel, handling and actually prime responsible for the destruction of Hungarian Jews because he didn't want to trade with Eichmann along the Katzner affair, and we don't have much time to look into it, but your listeners can look Katzner affair and they will find all the information for themselves.
I have a question for you, by the way. We've got another 3 minutes before, and I'm going to give you the last word. Let's because the European Union project is so important to the Zionist agenda and to the one world government agenda. And I know you have read and have studied this as well as anybody that I've ever come across. I want to get you on for an hour the week after next to come on the radio show and have a good go at this, because none of this can be criticised. You know that I'm a history graduate, although I was taught much of the history I was taught at second and third level turned out to be lies. When I went looking for myself, I found all sorts of interesting things. This is absolutely the crux of it. You know, they cannot have, because Jewish men and women are the same as you and me. They are born into slavery the same as you and me. They don't understand it.
I think that you're right.
Yeah.
But she doesn't look the same as you. But
yeah.
All right, let me make it very short because we have only 1 minute and I can sum it into 1 minute.
Go ahead, my friend.
Enjoy yourself. Now, here we go. How it goes. It is very simple. In the 19th century, we see the rise of European nationalist movement. It starts in France and then 1970 in Germany and Italy and so on and so on. Britain become more nationalist. And there are two ideologies that are set to destroy nationalism. One ideology is global capitalism. This is something that initially starts by the, let's say, Rothschild family, House of Rothschild. They realize that they can operate from different capitals and so on and so on. The other ideology is Bolshevism. Both global capitalism and Bolshevism are cosmopolitan movements. They are movements that go beyond borders and national states. The issue here is this: both ideologies, both perceptions, both precepts are Jewish, fundamentally Jewish. or led by Jews. When it comes to Bolshevism, we can start with Marx and then a chain of good-willing Jews to Trotsky. Some people may even say Lenin. And capitalism, we don't have to even talk about the overrepresentation of Jews leading this phenomenon. And this is quite devastating because Hitler, whether we like him or not, which is a different question, so that there is kind of the capitalism and Bolshevism are the two sides of the same coin, and this is where he decided to fight this phenomenon. Now, this is quite devastating thought because we were born into a split world, into a Cold War, into a world that was convinced that capitalism and Bolshevism are the ultimate enemies. Suddenly, here we are in the 21st century, we look backward and said, were they? Maybe not. Maybe it's a just internal Jewish conflict. Now, you ask yourself, how many people died in this conflict in the last century?
It's innumerable. Yeah, it's innumerable. Yeah.
This is what I call truthfulness. To be a Western person, and I'm really trying. My roots are not in the West, but I came to live here. I immigrated to Britain because I want to live in the West. To live in the West, to be a Western person, is to accept the notion of freedom, to be tolerant even if someone doesn't like you. If you are a Jew and someone doesn't like you, you listen and you address the problem and you look in the mirror. And I tell you something else. The Zionists were the first Jews who look in the mirror and they said, actually, there is a valid argument against us. This is why I have a lot of admiration to early Zionism. They were the first Jews who were brave enough to look in the mirror, but the project didn't work out because the people that were involved in making it into reality were the Jews themselves.
We'll pick this up again in a couple of weeks when you're off the road for a couple of days, Gilad. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, mate. People can go to gilad.co.uk where there are dozens and dozens of thought-provoking and brilliantly researched articles. Continued success with the tour. Next time, the very next time you're anywhere near us here in Manchester, I can't wait to see you. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, Gilad.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Gilad Atzmon, who joined me earlier, recorded him just before coming on air this morning. He's on tour at the moment with the Blockheads and the other groups. So there's really not much I can add to that other than I want to say this. When guys like me were making commercial radio programmes years ago and understood what Gilad Atzmon said there, but didn't speak out about it, didn't speak about it, didn't talk about it, didn't introduce it into our talk radio programmes, we refused to do that because we were terrified of where that would end up in terms of you were going to be out on your ear, my son, as a producer and as a presenter. And I've just been chatting with my mate Jean-Anne Crowley there on Facebook, and it occurred to me again that this is one of the reasons why I have nothing but love and admiration for David Icke, because David was writing about this at a time when you were vilified, you were pilloried, you were hammered, you were destroyed for saying these things or for introducing these subjects and these theories into any narrative. And David wrote in And The Truth Shall Set You Free, as I mentioned, to Gilad, and The Biggest Secret and other books. He was talking about this. Look, I've said it before. I say it now because I'm free to say it. I freed myself up to a point, to a position where I can now say this without fear of contradiction. As I put it to Gilad, I'll put it to you again. And I mentioned Bloodlines on the television show with Hayden Hewitt the other day, and a lot of you are very interested in that. The royal families of the world, the Rockefellers, the Oppenheimers, the Warburgs, the Rothschilds, of course, these people are related. They have been breeding and interbreeding for generations. And the reason Ken Livingstone and anybody in public life who is asking questions about Zionism, the reason they are being harassed, harried and humiliated, as we've seen in the last few days, the reason is because there's a yellow brick road here. And at the end of that yellow brick road, when you start to investigate these people, whom they were, whom they are, you come to the inescapable conclusion, because that's where the evidence takes you, that those architects, those who dreamed up the State of Israel, those who came up with the Sykes-Picot Agreement and laterally the Balfour Declaration, are the same globalists, the same bankers, the same industrialists who supported the Nazi Party and Hitler and did everything in their power for the Nazis to succeed, to dominate Europe so that they would claim the spoils of the post-World War II world. And that is a place that the elite, the cabal, or at least the gatekeepers of the cabal, cannot allow people go to. Because once they go down that road, they are then in a position where they are wide open to David Icke, to Jordan Maxwell, to Zechariah Sitchin, to Jim Mars, and everybody else who's been awake to this for decades and decades. It's not conspiracy theory. It's not crazy. It isn't anti-Jewish sentiment hidden behind a crazy conspiracy theory, as the Israeli ambassador would have you believe, Mark Regev. No, it isn't. Neither I nor anybody I know hates, despises, loathes, or ridicules, or I have run out of adjectives. No hatred for Jewish men and women. I've said thousands of times before, pre-1967 borders, right of return, 2 states side by side, Israel, Palestine. I've always said that, and I mean it. Jewish people can't face, some of them anyway, the truth about the architects of the State of Israel, who they were, and what they planned, and what their plans still are through the European Union, through the global trade agreements, what their plans still are for us today. It's as simple as that. I can't make it any more simple. It's my job. I feel it incumbent upon me to try and make it understandable, to simplify it. I think David does an amazing job of it. Gilad did an amazing job today. But there are still people who don't get it. They switch off. Their mind goes blank the minute they hear Bolshevism, the minute they hear capitalism, globalism. Mind just switches down. Never forget the fundamental fact. I'm going to repeat it again. Those Zionists who created the State of Israel did everything they could to help Hitler succeed through the period 1934-35 to the time when the Allies succeeded, when the Second World War ended. Imagine it. Look at the companies, look at the corporations, look at the people involved. I mentioned all these people on the television show and last week. Look at what they tried to do to FDR in 1933 at the exact same time in America. Now they're going to succeed, or they want to succeed, through the TTIP agreement, through the European Union. That's all I'm saying. That's the end of Sunday View today. My name is Richie Allen. Thank you so much for listening to it. Big thanks to Gilad for coming on, and to Claire Calvi and everybody else who works on the programme, Aaron and Simon. Tomorrow is a bank holiday. I don't work bank holidays because I don't get very much time off. So I will not be on air tomorrow, Monday at 8 p.m. BST, but I will return on Tuesday at 8 p.m. BST. We've got some terrific guests lined up for you this coming week, he says, as the old voice starts to give in on him. Now, before I do go, though, I want to urge you again. Thanks to everybody who supports the Richie Allen Show through richieallen.co.uk. There are bank details and PayPal details there. If you can donate, do. I really appreciate that. I'm going to leave that there for now. But a huge thanks to those who support the programme. Mark Bajerski, go to markbajerski.com. Check out Mark's website. Terrific information on there. Kim Hutchison, livingasyoursoul.com. We won't have a meditation from Kim now till next week, but that's okay. We'll be hearing from Kim next week anyway. And dataclinic.co.uk. Support those who support the independent media. That's a wonderful thing. If you want to buy a mug, by the way, Sean has just reminded me on Twitter, Sean Hinchcliffe, there are Richie Allen Show mugs which are on eBay. Go to ebay.co.uk, look for Richie Allen Show mug. All the proceeds minus costs go to the radio programme. Really appreciate that. And once again, happy birthday to young Lily Rose, who was born at 2:30 a.m. today. I don't think I've ever wished somebody happy birthday on the day they were born before. That's a first for me. To everybody who tweeted in today and emailed, thank you so much for doing that. I've not been able to see the emails. Unfortunately, there's a problem with my email server. I'll get to them later on, and where appropriate I will reply. Enjoy the rest of the bank holiday weekend, and I'll talk to you on Tuesday, as I said, at 8 p.m. BST. Until then, bye for now. Love talking to you. Bye for now.
Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.